Welcome to the regular Monday night class here at Against the Stream Meditation Center, Venice, California, October something, 2020. What's today, 5th, 4th, 5th. We gather regularly to practice and discuss the Buddha's teachings, what we call the Dharma, the truth, as we can experience directly through training our own heart and mind. And we begin with a 30-minute sitting meditation, and then we'll open to some dialogue and discussion about the Dharma. So thank you for joining me. Anybody that's here for the first time or tuning in for the first time, welcome. And find a way to sit that's upright, relaxed. Finding a posture that is sustainable. Sustainable meaning it's okay if you get uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable. One of the things we are learning is how to be uncomfortable and tolerate it and eventually care about our own pain, both physical and emotional, as well as the pain of others. So take a moment to settle in, adjust your posture, upright, relaxed, allowing your eyes to be gently closed, body to hang loosely around the upright spine, and establishing an inner attitude of friendliness, of kindness. With the intention to accept ourselves just as we are. With the intention to accept this world just as it is. But with the aspiration to respond more and more wisely, with more compassion to ourselves and to each other, and to this world. Relaxing any unnecessary tension in the face, shoulders, trunk of the body. And establishing mindfulness of the breath. Breathing in one nose, I breathe in. Breathing out, one nose, I breathe out. What allows you to know the breath? Give it your full attention. Letting the other sense doors, sounds, thoughts, be in the background. Bringing the breath to the foreground. Simple sensations of the air entering and exiting through the nostrils. Of course, the attention doesn't easily stay with the breath. We have to apply effort, a steadfast commitment to redirect the attention when it gets lost in thinking about the future or past, coming back to the present, body, sitting, breathing. Return as many times as you need to, disengaging from the thinking mind, returning to the feeling body. bringing the quality of investigation into the practice, a intention to have unentangled participation with your experience, not a detached observation, but an engagement that isn't all tied up in knots, not taking it all so personal. As we expand to include our whole being, this physical body, all of the emotions experienced in the body, sensations, the sense doors, images and sounds, smells and tastes. And the mind itself. Thoughts arising, passing through consciousness, bringing mindfulness to the mind, just as we do to the breath and body. Mindfulness is open and inclusive rather than just the breath, your whole being included. The more we pay attention in this way, the more we come to directly know the impermanent nature, the constantly changing nature of all of the phenomena of the body and heart and mind. Arising and passing of sensation, of emotion, of thoughts. And it becomes more clear that we perceive each experience as pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. Every thought has a feeling tone, every sound, every sensation. Bringing interest, not to just what's happening, but how it feels and how we are participating, how we're relating to, responding to the pain in the body, and the heart and the mind, the pleasant moments in the body and the heart and the mind, and all of the neutral, neither pleasant nor unpleasant experiences that are unfolding moment to moment. The task is to learn to meet our pain with acceptance and tolerance, compassion and forgiveness. To meet our pleasure with non-attachment while still enjoying, appreciating. We awaken the heart quality of compassion by turning towards our pain. No longer running, avoiding, or ignoring. We take our seat, and we breathe into it. We turn towards the difficult, and eventually we begin to see how impersonal this mind, this body, these emotions truly are. Taking a moment to reflect on what just transpired in your heart and mind as you directed your attention to the breath and body and mind, and what am I learning? I think one of the questions is we should be asking ourselves a lot is, what am I learning about my mind? What am I learning about my relationship to discomfort, or my craving for pleasure, or my tendency to make everything about me? Whatever is happening in the world to take personal. Like, what are we learning about this human condition? I don't really have a Dharma talk for tonight, so I'm going to just read a short. I mostly want to do a Q&A, so think of any questions you might have about the Dharma, about meditation practice, about the Buddha's teachings, anything that's sort of on your mind that you'd like to inquire about. We just made these new Against the Stream bandanas that have, one of the things that I kind of serve the truth, defy the lie, which is one of the, I don't know, what kind of logos that I have been running with. Actually, it's a homage. I borrowed it, I stole it, whatever you want to say, from one of my favorite Krishna core bands, Hindu hardcore bands, a band called 108, Serve the Truth, Defy the Lie. And so I'll read this short, or not so short, but I'll read this section from the Revolutionary Manifesto from 2007, Against the Stream. The section called Defy the Lies, and then we can have some discussion, Q&A. We have all been seduced by the world's enchanting offers of happiness through pleasure and accumulation, but they are lies, shams, fallacies. In order to find the true happiness and freedom that are available, we must understand this clearly. We must experience a revolution in our perception of the material world. Inside each one of us resides the truth, and however deeply buried or obscured that truth has become, we have the ability to uncover and experience it for ourselves, and happiness and freedom will follow. The path to liberation is one of defiance and renunciation. We must overthrow the deluded dictators of our mind and see through the confusion of the world. This will take great effort and a steadfast engagement with our own moment-to-moment experience. Every day we are lied to by the world. Our societies, our families, and our religions tend to be filled with delusional ideals. Human beings have created a deeply dysfunctional culture. The insecurity of the human condition has led to the creation of many violent religions and scientific rationalizations. We've been destroying each other and this planet for too long. Human ignorance is the status quo. Even in the most highly educated or religious people, we see the unnecessary suffering of ego identification, lack of acceptance, and greed for power. In America, we like to talk about equality and human rights, but this country was founded on violence and oppression. Our forefathers stole this land from the native peoples, waging war on the rightful inhabitants of this continent. The history of slavery and racist oppression towards each newly arriving ethnicity on these shores has left us with a legacy of ignorance. Although some of the outright bigotry has lessened in our recent past, racism is still the substratum of our society's structure. This is not just an American phenomena. In fact, our classist, sexist, and racist culture is quite similar to the ancient Indian society that the Buddha was born into. Ignorance is not just Western or Eastern, it is human. For the awakened revolution to take root, the pervasive racist structure of society has to be dismantled. This is what the Buddha began to do way back in the day through nonviolent defiance and compassionate engagement with the system of oppression. There is nothing incompatible between defying the lies of human ignorance and serving the truth of enlightened human potential. Defiance is renunciation, the effort of avoiding and speaking out against the causes of suffering is always going to be part of the path to spiritual awakening. Religion, which was obviously created to give meaning and purpose to people, has become part of the oppression. This is true in both Eastern and Western religious traditions. The Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad were all revolutionaries who critiqued and attempted to dismantle the corrupt societal traditions of their time. Yet their teachings, like most things in human society, have been distorted and co-opted by the confused and power-hungry patriarchal traditions. What were once the creation myths of ancient cultures have become doctrines of oppression. More blood has been spilled and more people oppressed in the name of religion than for any other reason in history. Although faith and religiosity are central to human history, it may be time to reject all forms of organized religion and to begin afresh with practical, applicable, and experiential philosophy. I would reject so-called Buddhism along with the rest, because much of what masquerades as Buddhism today is in direct opposition to what the Buddha actually did and taught. The Buddha was insistent on questioning and defying the religious structure. He urged everyone he came into contact with to find the truth for themselves, not based on faith or tradition, but out of their own direct experience of wisdom and compassion. So the spiritual revolutionary must defy the religious structures as well as the material world. We can look to religions and spiritual teachings for the tools of awakening. The truth does reside in most of the religions, but we must understand that all religions also contain confused traditions and lies that need to be destroyed by clear understanding and our own direct experience of awakening. Defiance means standing up for what you know is right, rejecting patriarchal human dogma, and embracing the search for meaning with a steadfast engagement with reality. It means seeing clearly our mind's fears and attachments as impersonal, conditioned phenomena, and destroying the misidentification with the mind's confusion. Beneath the confusion, we will find the heart's natural wisdom and compassion. The spiritual revolutionary defies both the internal and external forces of oppression. What do you think of that soapbox? A couple questions coming through online before the reading. If you have any reflections, questions, comments, feel free here to raise your hand, or online to raise your hand or put it in the chat. There's a question here about forgiveness. It says, your thoughts on forgiveness in terms of chronic disease. My spouse has progressive multiple sclerosis, and this is a consistent source of suffering for me. I think that life is so fucking brutal already, and experience that kind of chronic illness and of a loved one or oneself or a loved one, that it's already so painful. When we meet it with hatred, it makes it worse. It multiplies the difficulty that we're facing. Forgiveness means letting go of the hatred that we meet painful, difficult situations or experiences with. So in that way, absolutely, we want to try to bring an attitude of compassion and forgiveness to chronic illness, chronic disease. Meet it with compassion, not hatred. Meet it with forgiveness. I mean, it's so natural. Of course, the status quo is going to be anger and hatred towards, the disease that's affecting your loved one and the potential loss. But as we all know, it just is piling extra difficulty on top of an already very difficult situation. And compassion doesn't get rid of the pain, but it gets rid of an extra layer of suffering on top of the pain. So the Buddhist perspective is always bring compassion, bring forgiveness, train your mind, train your heart to respond as much as we can with friendliness and with forgiveness to this kind of disease experience. Please, Judy.
So, can I just ask what that would look like? How does that look? I understand what you're saying, but I don't know what that looks like. I don't know. After working, somebody being so sick, and how do you bring friendliness to a thing that you're starting to resent because it's taking up all your time? It's making everybody get sicker. I just don't know what that looks like. What does compassion
it's not, I mean, maybe it's just semantics. You're asking what it looks like. It's what it feels like. It's an internal, I don't know if everybody at home could hear, but the question was like, what would it look like to have forgiveness and compassion towards a chronic illness, or with the statement of like, it's so difficult. And of course we resent it. And that's what I'm saying. But if we train our mind and we say, I forgive you to the disease. My father used to encourage people with chronic illnesses definitely with terminal illnesses, to send loving kindness and compassion and forgiveness to the tumors, to the cancer, to the multiple sclerosis, to take it rather than as the enemy that I hate, to take it as a very painful reality that if we meet it with friendliness, we will end some of the suffering in our own heart. So it's not what it looks like, it's acknowledging how terribly difficult that task is. And, I'm reading from Against the Stream, and this is why waking up is so difficult, because we are wired to create suffering for ourselves when life is painful. Or also when life is pleasurable, we're also wired to cling to it and get attached and addicted and create suffering for ourselves when life is painful, pleasurable also, or take it for granted and miss it. Sometimes these chronic illnesses, terminal illnesses, are real wake-up calls for people. And people are like, wow, I finally, now that I've lost some mobility or some, I started to realize how much I was complacent, and now I'm just appreciative of every moment, and I'm just more awake and more loving because I see the preciousness of this very temporary opportunity that we have here in life. So it's a feeling, it's, and when you're angry, and when you're You know when you're meeting pain with hatred, and you know when you're meeting pain with acceptance and tolerance and forgiveness. It's how does that, it feels so different. And you know, the core difference is there's no suffering on top of the pain. It's just pain and mercy and compassion and forgiveness. It doesn't make life any less painful. Life is just as painful as it's going to be, physically, but it does take away some of those layers of emotional pain. Someone just commented in the comments, a chronic illness diagnosis led me to a deeper meditation practice. So sometimes it does work like that, and it's a wake-up call and a deepening. Question here says, what do you think the path out of self-absorption and towards taking other people's freedom seriously looks like? Doesn't the renunciation of pleasure become the pleasure of renunciation? I don't know if I have a great answer to this, Raphael. My own perspective is that it's not an either or dilemma that we're in. I know that sometimes spiritual circles want to talk about selflessness, and how are we talking about it? Out of self-absorption and towards taking other people's freedom seriously. My own feeling, based on what the Buddha was teaching, is that it's really very much both and. There's nowhere where the Buddha is saying put everyone else first and have, forget about yourself. He's very much saying do your own work, train your mind, train your heart, wake up. And the outcome of your awakening will be compassion for all living beings. But sometimes we want to put the cart before the horse, and we want to say, like, let's just make everyone else first, and let's forget the self. Let's forget about our own suffering as though we could just turn it off. The Buddhist model, early Buddhism, I believe, is do your own work. Tend towards your mind and your heart and your body. And at the same time, start being kind and generous and compassionate and forgiving. Don't wait till you feel totally altruistic before you start being of service to each other. Do it right from the beginning, because it'll help break our self-concern, our self-centeredness. Do it through being of service. But also I don't think it's skillful for us to bring an idea that we can just turn off our self-concern. And I've seen more than one person, and an example of somebody in our Sangha who I was speaking to this week, who said, 10 years into his meditation practice and his recovery and putting everyone else first, as a avoidance technique, like in recovery, sometimes, that's sort of taught in the 12-step model. It's taught like, get out of self-centeredness by being of service to the new people. And then he saw, oh, here I am 10 years later, and I've put everyone else first, tried to set aside my self-concern, and I never tended to my trauma. That was what created my addiction in the first place. And I have avoided it successfully, but now I'm hitting the wall in these unmanageable anxiety attacks. And it's just, I could only stay ahead of it for so long. And so that's why the Buddhist model is so much different than that, which is saying, no, be of service for sure, be generous, but also sit down, shut up, and look at your own mind. And look at your own pain, and incline your heart towards compassion and forgiveness from the beginning. In refuge recovery, we encourage people right when they're getting sober, start doing self-forgiveness. Start forgiving yourself. Start turning towards your pain. Start forgiving others. Make that the foundation of your recovery, that it's from the inside, that it's not just Let me help others and avoid my pain. Let me tend to my pain. So, let me see, there's a second part of that. The second part of that question was, doesn't the renunciation of pleasure become the pleasure of renunciation? Maybe the answer is yes. What do you think? Like when you hear that, and you don't have to answer, but just reflect. Have you ever really gotten a bunch of pleasure out of renunciation? The question is, does the renunciation of pleasure become the pleasure of renunciation?
It's the attachment.
So don't just reflect. Don't just reflect on it. Everybody just reflecting on your experience with renunciation. Have you done enough renunciation to actually get pleasure out of it? I think that maybe the answer is yes on some level, but renunciation, like all of our practices, has a life of its own and has many phases. There will be times when renunciation feels like so difficult and so such an austerity. Like you're not doing something that you really want to do, and it feels like such a burden. And there'll be other times when renunciation feels like a pleasure, like, oh, I'm so glad I don't drink anymore. I'm so glad I don't lie or steal or whatever it is. And it feels like what a pleasure it is to not participate in that stuff that was causing me suffering. But there'll be a continuum, I believe. And that ultimately, the more we unpack the self and see that none of this is as personal as we've been making it, then there'll be an experience of, sometimes renunciation is pleasant and sometimes it is unpleasant, but it's just how we live. It's just the healthy choice. I don't know. I mean, I watch my children's relationship to brushing their teeth. I don't know if you remember when you didn't want to brush your teeth? Like, I don't experience that anymore. I want to brush my teeth at least twice a day. I want to. There's no like, I don't fucking want to do that. That's like some burden on me. It's like, no, I want to brush my teeth when I wake up, and maybe later in the day, and definitely before bed, I want to brush my teeth. But children resist it often. They're just like, oh no, that's a burden. That's a chore. Don't make me do it. My son will bargain with me. Like, please, please, please don't make me brush my teeth. Our meditation practice can become like that too. In the beginning, it feels like a burden, and we're bargaining and negotiating, and then later you just become like, of course I want to meditate. Like, it's the healthiest thing that I do. It's the best part of my day, even though sometimes it's a bit unpleasant. I have to feel my feelings, and I have to watch my mind, and my knees ache. And likewise with renunciation, we become more and more. And if it's pleasant, I see no, and I mean, here's maybe the last piece for this around pleasure becoming, renunciation becoming the pleasure of renunciation. I see nothing wrong with that. We're not trying to avoid pleasure. It's actually one of the reasons we're practicing is to be happy, to experience joy, to have a healthy relationship to pleasure, to not suffer about it. That's part of the internal awakening that happens. So I see nothing wrong with enjoying the pleasure of renunciation. Please, Rick.
The notion of the impersonal has come up in a number of contexts. Can you spend a few more moments helping us? What tools do you use to distinguish between what should be seen as impersonal as opposed to what should be seen as karmic or a personal lesson? How does one know the difference?
The question is, how do we know the difference between the impersonal and our karmic lessons, this feels sometimes like a dichotomy. On one level, I'll be saying, take total personal responsibility for your happiness, for your actions, for your speech, but also don't take it so personally. Don't take what arises in your mind or your emotions or this human survival instinct that we're all living with. Don't think it's self. And where do we find that balance between take it personal, take personal responsibility? Part of it is take full responsibility for how we're behaving. You know, last week I was talking about death and that last reflection in the 5 daily reflections that says our only true possession is our actions. The only thing that we really own is how we behave. And so on some level, that sounds a bit personal. Somebody asked me this week on Instagram and a DM, they saw that posting from last week and they said, okay, so if there's not a self, who owns the karma? Right? Who owns the karma? I forget exactly what I said, but it was really good. It was something like, it's not that there's a self that owns the karma, but there is the karma of having a body and a mind creates a sense of self. And as long as we continue to behave unskillfully, we continue that momentum of the karma. But then when we practice the renunciation, when we train the mind, we can actually end the karma, and that wakes us up to the deathless, and we end the cycle of being this karmic momentum that keeps on rolling. You can end your karma. I don't think I'm answering your question. Here's what I want to say, which is also not an answer to your question. I used to say this, you've probably heard me since you've been practicing with me forever. But this question that we all have of like, I feel like a self, I, me, mine, the human mind does that all day long. I feel this way. We say it in language when we're talking to each other. I, that's mine. But then upon deep investigation, we can't find a permanent self. You've been meditating for decades. Can't find, where is that self? And so then the question is the self a illusion? Is it a delusion? Does the self exist? The self that we're supposed to take personal responsibility for? And this image of, or this question that, do rainbows exist? Have you ever seen a rainbow? Is a rainbow real? It's an observable phenomena. So does it exist? You can't touch it, but I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Are rainbows real? Or are they completely an illusion? Is it an optical illusion? Maybe that's what it is. It's an optical illusion. So the self is something like a rainbow. It's observable. Everyone feels it. You see it in your own mind, the I, me, mine. Well, what I know, I don't know that much about rainbows, but what I think I know about rainbows is that if the right conditions come together, enough, I guess it's moisture. There's some moisture in the air, sunlight reflecting off of the moisture. And then there has to be some earth. It's the 4 elements basically coming together. There has to be some earth for it to bounce off of the mountains and or the sea. It has to, have a beginning, something to bounce off of. So the 4 elements come together I guess maybe temperature is part of it. I'm not sure. Maybe temperature isn't part of it. I'm not sure. Maybe a rainbow can exist in any temperature. I don't know the answer to that. But part of what the Buddha was teaching, and part of what we can experience directly, is that this feeling of self is created by having a body, the right factors coming together, having a body and a mind that has consciousness and memory, and then perceives I am. And often adds this ignorance to it, which is I am permanent and unchanging. And then some people want to call that a soul or a self with a capital S. Rather than truly investigating what's happening here, which is this unfolding process of mind and body and consciousness and memories and perceptions that create a feeling of, I still remember being a kid and I feel like I'm that same kid that has just grown up, but that's just a memory. That self, that kid self, that teenage self, that yesterday self, that 5 minute ago self is no longer here. Those conditions have arisen and have passed. And so each moment we're creating this new self that's unfolding, but there's no permanent self. Part of what I'm pointing to when I say impersonal. A couple more questions online. Sometimes when I'm meditating and losing concentration, I try to bring myself close to the body or close to myself. Wouldn't this reinforce some kind of ego and not allow you to feel more connected to everything else? I don't know, Max, if what I was just saying helped answer that, because my sense is that actually the closer we get to our direct experience, the more we see through the ego, the more we see that what's happening here is truly an interconnected experience with all living beings. So getting closer and closer to this impermanent, porous manifestation of the four elements gets us closer to every other interconnected manifestation of the four elements. And if you're truly paying attention to your mind, it won't strengthen your ego, it will dismantle your ego, because you'll just see that the ego is an insubstantial, impersonal byproduct of the human brain. And it's just not. I think that actually getting closer and more investigation and deeper into this laboratory that we call our bodies or ourselves will reveal the Dharma, right? This is the Buddha's teaching. All of the Dharma, the truth of reality, of nature, will be revealed right here in this human experience, in this body. Now, if we're not practicing correctly and don't have the correct instructions, of course, we could use meditation as another way to bolster a sense of self rather than dismantle a sense of self. How did the Buddha view Buddhism in regards of religion? Is Buddhism a religion in the traditional sense? I don't think so. And, Buddhism wasn't, is a term that later was applied to what Siddhartha Gautama taught. I don't think he viewed it as a religion. My sense is that Siddhartha Gautama, who we call the Buddha, viewed it as a practical humanist psychology. We could call it maybe a spiritual path, but a practical way for human beings to find their way out of suffering. He said, here's the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, not here's religion, but here's a way to live your life, to train your mind, to awaken in this lifetime. So feels much more like a applicable philosophy than a religious dogmatic belief system. That having been said, in the last 2,600 years since the Buddha died, it has absolutely been turned into a religion, and a religion in many ways that is in direct contradiction to what the Buddha was teaching. Just like every other religion, in contradiction to what the founder, Jesus, or whatever, or whoever was teaching. You know, like human beings will really fuck up a spiritual path and turn it into a religion, as we've done with every, you know, kind of good teaching. We make them saints and we start worshiping them, and we stop practicing what was actually taught by this amazingly wise, kind, loving being, and turned it into a power structure, and turned it into a financial endeavor, and turned it into a way to control and manipulate people. And Buddhism has become that too. Buddhism is not a perfect religion. It's a you know, a very dogmatic, you know, there's a lot of oppression in a lot of the forms of Buddhism. So I love what the Buddha taught. For lack of a better label, I'm happy to consider myself a Buddhist, but I also feel like it's part of my job and our job as a kind of anti-establishment Buddhist community to critique and try to you know, bring some sanity back to, let's practice what the Buddha taught, not just believe in it, and certainly not create golden temples or, you know, corrupt power structures around it, but apply it to our own lives. So yeah, basically the Buddha would be pissed. Any other questions from the room before I keep taking the comments from online, please?
This just occurred to me. I was wondering, you were talking about self-care. I don't really think about this stuff, but I don't know what Buddhism believes, but if we don't have a soul, then what is it that takes the karma to the next life? Or if we believe in reincarnation, is it like just like energy transfer, or?
I don't know if you guys can hear the question from home, can you? The question was, if Buddhism teaches that there's not a soul, a permanent soul, but that there is a karmic transfer in this sort of rebirth, reincarnation, what takes the karma to the next lifetime? If reincarnation is in fact what's happening, but there is not a soul or a self that migrates from lifetime to lifetime, and it's really just the karma that transfers, what is the, you didn't say this, but what came to mind was like, what is the container? What contains the karma? I don't know. It's a good question. I like that kind of question, but I don't know, and I don't think it's one of the things that the Buddha ever answers. You know, and sometimes in early Buddhism, questions like these are just replied to with, if you knew that, would that help you not suffer? If I told you like the kind of container that your karma, would that somehow help you be less attached and less aversive and less self-centered? You know, because the Buddha will kind of always come back to, I'm only teaching you how not to suffer. Like, stop worrying about these esoteric philosophical things. Now, somebody might push back and say, like, well, then why are you teaching this esoteric shit about reincarnation? If you don't want us to ask you too many questions about it. But I don't, I think it's an interesting question. And I like this coming back to just like, who knows? And coming back to like I think it's very healthy to have agnostic. Yeah, you know what I mean by agnostic? Like, I don't believe in it, but I don't not believe in it. I don't know. Who knows? But I feel like it's not very important to what we're doing here. What we're doing here is becoming mindful of impermanence and trying to come more into harmony with impermanence. What we're doing here is trying to see through our self-centeredness and become more kind and generous and altruistic, more part of the solution in the world. And we'll find out when we die. Maybe, and maybe not, like, I don't know. Don't know. But maybe your answer was the best, which was just some sort of energy.
I suppose it
Maybe.
doesn't really matter.
Yeah, maybe it's just some sort of energy. Yeah. But, like on that, what's the soul? Just some sort of energy? What's a spirit? What's a karmic momentum? I don't know. A couple more online questions. It looks like I've got a bunch. I don't know if I'll get to all these, but let me try. Lee says, something I'm learning deeper and deeper as I live each day committed to love and freedom from the suffering is the difference between what is visible and what is felt and embodied. It strikes me that what is visible is often not reflective of the feeling, and this can be painful because we want to be understood by other beings. We want people to see that we are experiencing an inner joy. We want people to see that we are forgiving each other. We often connect through our visibility and perceptions. How can we free ourselves from the desire to be understood by others? It seems to me like freedom from this desire could lead to the lessening of effort for connection. Thanks for your thoughts and your commitment and the Sangha, and your commitment and the Sangha. In this, I don't know if it was in the Ajahn Amaro book that we're reading right now, or it was a Dharma talk I was recently listening to of his. But he was talking about the self. He's always talking about this sort of way that we create a self. And he was encouraging, he said, it's such a great practice to be misunderstood by people. He said, really give yourself permission because of this, exactly what you're asking about, Lee, this tendency to really want to be seen and understood and how much self we can bring to that. He said, but basically it's like a dead end to always wanting to be seen and understood, and you're just not going to get those needs met all of the time. He said, take it on as a practice to be misunderstood without trying to explain yourself, to be not seen without sort of like trying to force people to see you and to acknowledge you. And what I took from that was that the Dharma has the power and the potential to develop such a way that we know our own worth and we see ourselves and we are awake enough to who we are, that we're no longer dependent on other people's views and opinions and how we're seen. The whole sort of, I hope that makes sense. That was my takeaway. And that actually being able to tolerate, you're being misunderstood or being judged, and just let it be okay. And I don't need everyone to think that to be praising me or thinking like, oh, wow, what a kind person or compassionate person, or just to like be misunderstood. That having been said, I'll now contradict myself and say that this is one of the reasons why Sangha is so important. And to have relationships with people who you know that part of their spiritual practice is appreciative joy. You know, like if you really want to be celebrated by people, hang around with people who it's part of their practice to see you and to celebrate you, that it's part of their commitment to their own awakening, that they will have appreciative joy for the people in their life. And they'll be, you know, like, I see you and I see your suffering and I care about it. I see your joy and I care about it. That's one of the functions of us hanging out with each other, of people who are on the same page, or at least similar page. Expecting that kind of acknowledgement and seeing from people in the world who are blind. And by blind, you know, I'm referring to the Buddha upon awakening say, you know, the world is filled with people who are completely blind, not awake, asleep. And that very few people, he says, I teach the Dharma for those with little dust in their eyes. Expecting our friends, our colleagues, our family who are self-centered, aversive, attached people to see us is a setup for disappointment. Bringing that desire into a healthy community of people who are trying to be mindful, to a community of people who are trying to see ourselves and each other clearly, there's going to be hopefully more potential. Any of you who've been a part of a Sangha, you'll know that there's a whole bunch of self-centered people in the Sangha too that also won't see you. But at least there's more potential in a spiritual community to be seen, if that's, you know, important to us. Please.
I think that's like I think that's the lesson of Maya, is just to learn to appreciate it.
Yeah. I like, yeah. You think that like that's one of the core appreciation for each other, for ourselves?
Being here, the whole lessons, the ups and the downs, and I think that's what it's all about.
It's a big part of it. From the Buddhist, are you familiar with the Brahma Viharas? It's the Buddhist, like, there are these 4 kind of core qualities of the awakened heart and mind. And appreciation is a quarter of it. Compassion is a quarter of it. Loving kindness is a quarter of it. And then the other quarter, the balancing, is equanimity. And that, you know, this is what the Buddha says. He says, when you wake up, when your heart is free from the confusion and the suffering, the ignorance, what remains is appreciation and compassion and kindness and equanimity. And that's really, on some level, it's the goal. On some level, it's just what happens when you are less confused. Question about self-compassion, self-love, and self-forgiveness. What would the Buddha say the point, purpose, or meaning of life is? First part, self-compassion, self-love, and self-forgiveness are all done through repeating phrases, the kind of Theravadan commentary-based practice. And in the suttas, there's 2 different ways. One is to just like bring up the feeling of love and then just turn it towards yourself, loving kindness, feeling of ease. May I be at ease, may bring up the feeling of compassion and then just direct that towards yourself as well as others, or the feeling of forgiveness. But the way I mostly teach it is, rather than waiting for the feeling, to actually use words, to train the mind to create mind habits, neuro pathways by saying to yourself, I forgive you. By saying to yourself over and over in meditation, I forgive you as much as I can in this moment. By saying to yourself in your, like a mantra, slowly in your own heart and mind, may I learn to care about my own pain. That's compassion. May I learn to meet my own pain with mercy, with friendliness, self-compassion. And, you know, love can be loving kindness, or just saying, you can either do the affirmation, I love you. There was a teacher that used to teach here at Against the Stream that had this meditation phrase that I borrowed, a lot of us borrowed, that was saying to yourself, I love you, keep going. George Haas, one of our old teachers, and he would just say, I love you, keep going. And you say that to yourself, even though you don't mean it. And then you say it to yourself more and more, and eventually you mean it. I love you. And keep going, I think, was like, keep going towards freedom. Keep going on the path. Don't stop. Don't stop doing the work. Alan had a question about not self. I don't think I have time, but maybe next week I'll do a more thorough investigation on not self. Somebody says, I think that the self is not stable. That would fit. Somebody likes the rainbow metaphor. That's probably all the time we have for tonight. I'll leave you with the follow-up of the Defy the Lies, which is serve the truth. Just to read a little piece here. Service is at the heart of the revolution. A deep commitment to honesty and integrity is necessary for all who wish to make positive changes in this world. We don't have to be perfect or holy, but we do need to be honest with ourselves and one another. We must dedicate ourselves to finding the deepest compassion and highest wisdom. And from that place, we can live in accordance with the truth of reality. Service. Finding that balance so that we don't use service as an avoidance where we're, finding that balance of internal, our own healing, our own meditation, our own turning towards, but also generosity and service and engagement with all of the ignorance that we are living and breathing in this world. Class is done by donation. Thanks everybody for joining me for class tonight. Against the Stream is a nonprofit organization. Here in Venice, we have a meditation center that we pay rent on and pay electricity, and we have some expenses. And the expenses are meant to be met by the Sangha, by the people who attend both online and in person. Some people make the decision to become a monthly supporter of Against the Stream by signing up on our website, againstthestream.com, to do a monthly donation, which helps us greatly. So if you're not a monthly supporter and you're able to become one, please consider becoming a monthly supporter. All of that is on againstthestream.com. And Rachel has posted it in the chat if you're online, link over there. These new bandanas, fresh off the press from India, will be available. I just sent them to my mom. She does the mail order stuff. They'll be available. If you're in the room, they're available here. If you're at home and you want to order them, they'll be available next week. We'll get them posted on the website. And then, I made them intentionally so that I could use them, we could use them as face masks, where you get the serve the truth, defy the lie, outlaw look right over your face, walk into a bank. And I don't think I have any announcements of upcoming anything. I would like to organize a day-long retreat. I'm dying to have some residential retreats again. Looks like it's probably going to be next year, but with a little bit of support and encouragement, I could probably get a outdoor, like maybe half day or day long in a park somewhere around here that we could do. Outdoor day long would be nice for the community. We are still at a place, I believe, in LA where we're not supposed to have more than 12 people gathered inside. And for health and wellness precautions, it seems like a good idea to stay small for now. So hopefully see you back next week. Thanks for being here. May any goodness that comes from our practice and discussion of the Buddha's Dharma be offered out in all directions, shared with all living beings. May each one of us awaken, and together may we create a positive change on this planet.